Well, hello everybody. How you doing? Hi, Bettina. How are you?
Hi, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm doing great. I'm really doing great.
We've had a couple of weeks off. There's been a lot going
Well,
on in your life.
yeah, a lot of things going on, a lot of upheaval, a lot of personal stuff I had to work through, and um, there's always stuff. There's always stuff,
Yeah.
but it just seemed the last couple of weeks it hit its worst point on Friday. So sorry about that, people.
Yeah.
That's just somehow how it. Sometimes that's just how it goes.
I love your process too, though. Like when stuff gets difficult or when stuff starts coming up or life gets tough. I know that for myself, turning to books has always been kind of my go-to. And it, even if it can't completely solve my life in a matter of days, what it does for me is it gives me like a real solid foundation. Like it gives me my mind something to root on that I know that I can start feeling like I have control because I'm learning things and I'm learning new ways to represent things in my mind and I'm doing learning new ways to use my power to create changes in my situation that I want to see. And oftentimes just that is enough, a handful of good ideas, and finding a good book, a good author, really helps like give me the foundation I need to start moving in the direction I want to when I feel like I'm in free fall, when I feel like I can't get any traction.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think when we get into that place, instead of sort of drowning in whatever it is that's going on, sometimes just taking that positive action to read something that's a little more life affirming and a little more proactive as far as getting back on track is always a really good thing. So that's what I did. Now, um, in the last couple of months, maybe even year, um, I guess I've been under a lot of stress. Now, here's the thing: you can sometimes fool yourself when you get when you're in this on this spiritual path into thinking, oh, everything's fine, everything's peaceful, everything's calm. But under the surface, there's things happening that you're not even really paying attention to or aware of. And I think there was a lot of that happening for me. And I think we get to that point where we start thinking, well, by now I should be okay, so I must be okay. And that's not necessarily true. Life is sometimes messy, and no matter how much work we do, life still goes on, and we're still living through. We're living in a world of egos, and we're living in a world of being very much in the body and in the past and in the future and very rarely in the present. So the thing is that stuff isn't going to change, but our perspective on it is going to change. But I've been experiencing a lot of anxiety, excuse me, a lot of anxiety, a lot of, and then a couple of weeks ago, I had a couple of panic attacks, which I haven't had for years and years and years. And the thing is, sorry, I
I heard
heard
the
my
beat too.
iron. Yeah, did you? Yeah, it was my iron. I think it's unplugged, so that's good. Um, but anytime this has ever come up, I've never really been able to put a finger on why I feel this way. Like, and I've even said before, I feel like I was born with fear. I feel like I've always had this fear. I feel like this fear has always been dogging me all my life. And no matter what work I've done, it never seems to, and I'm not saying that fear disappears, but to the extent that I was feeling it, I think it was a little too excessive and for really no particular reason. So this group that I'm in, the Course of Miracles group that I'm in, that I, as a participant, not as a leader, I saw someone talk about the girl who's leading it. Was talking about something called family constellations. And then somebody else and she brought up the book, but this was ages ago. And clearly I wasn't ready for that ages ago. But then a couple of weeks ago, somebody else mentioned the book. And I thought, you know, I think I should look into this. So last week I did two things. I ordered the book and started reading it. And I went to see my naturopath because I think all the stress has really played a little bit of havoc with my body. And I felt like I needed physical support as well as emotional support for whatever it is I was going through. So I went to see her, and I felt much better when I left her office because I did not, I was thinking, oh, this is just me that's going through this nonsense. And she said, no, women of my age, I will say the dreaded word menopausal, postmenopausal, I guess. And she said, everybody thinks that, and this is for all the women out there who think they're alone in this, and think and believe in that whole concept of, oh, when you reach menopause, you're free. Your freedom is, your life is free. You can say what you want and do what you want and go where you want. And it's not really the truth. There's a lot of things that go with it that can cause stress and anxiety and discomfort and whatever else. So I felt a lot better coming out of her office. But then I came home and this book was there, and this is the book. It's called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Walwyn. And it's based on the premise that, the subtitle is How Inherited Family Drama Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. So he talks about two different ways that you can take on inherited family trauma. One is through DNA. So if your mother was going through something when she was carrying you, you can take on some of that DNA because it affects when we're stressed or fearful or upset or angry or whatever, it affects our DNA. And there's all this scientific, the first part of the book is very scientific. It talks about different studies that have been done that back up these ideas, and it was really interesting, even down to the fact that if a mother is carrying a female baby before the baby's born, it can affect that mother's eventual grandchild because the girl baby is developing inside the mother. And while she is developing inside the mother, her eggs are developing as well. So it hits two generations. So there's that way. And then there's the way of the way you inherit it through experience. So I found this very, very interesting. And I started seeing a lot of things that had been happening in my life, taking on my mother's emotional wellness and trying to be her, like ever since I was a little kid, trying to take care of her emotionally, which they call merging with your parent. But at some point in the book, it's really good because it tells you how to sort of nail down the core language, the core complaint. So what is it? What are those things that you keep saying that keep repeating and repeating and repeating? And one of the things I recognized was nobody recognizes me. Nobody acknowledges me. Nobody pays attention to me and what I'm doing and who I am. And so that was for me a really good place to start. And then I realized I had the first panic attacks I was 33 years old. So I sat down with my mother last week, I have a piece of paper, my little notes here. And I said, okay, I'm missing a page, but let's go through the family tree from my great-grandparents down to my parents, right? So we started with my dad's side of the family. Well, first of all, the first thing I asked my mother was, when I was a little kid, my mother had something, arthritis, but she could barely walk. Like she had to crawl up the stairs at night. and she couldn't make a fist or unscrew bottle caps, and they thought she had rheumatoid arthritis, and she was in the hospital with it and all sorts of stuff. She was 33, and she was 33 in 1960. Yeah, I would have been 4 or 5. Those two ages are really important. My first panic attacks, I was 33, and Stephen was 5. So, okay, so that was fine. And I had to do a lot of stuff. And I think a child at that age has no idea what's happening and is afraid of what's going on, right? Because no one really tells the child, especially back in those days. So then we get to my dad's side of the family, and I know my dad's mother died in childbirth when he was 5 years old. So I said to my mother, how old was Dad's mother when she died? And I knew the answer before she even told me. She was 33. So this book has a few case studies, people who started suffering at a certain age from certain things and had no idea why they were suddenly doing these things. And they found out that, like, this one kid was at 19 years old, was waking up in the middle of the night, couldn't get back to sleep, had cold chills, had no idea why it was happening or what was going on, and found out that his uncle, when he was 19, had worked in the Northwest Territories laying electrical lines or something up there, and he died of hypothermia. Hypothermia? Yeah. At 19. And no one ever talked about that uncle. And yet, here was this kid who had taken on this family trauma. No one ever talked about my dad's mother. No one even talked about my dad to my dad about my dad's mother. My grandfather remarried, and that's the person I knew as my grandmother. And I didn't find out that she wasn't my biological grandmother until I was in my teens. And I didn't find out even how my biological grandmother had died until I was like in my early 20s. Like, my father never talked about his mother because at 5 years old, she died. No one told him anything. No one, you know what I mean? Like, it was just, that's it. She's gone. This is your life now. He was sent to an orphanage with his brother and sisters at one point. Before his father went to Italy to get a new wife, and then came back with this new wife. So I'm thinking, there was this grandmother, my father's mother, who was never acknowledged, never recognized, never spoken about. And at 33, she died. And at 33, I started having the panic attacks. I'm dying. I know I'm dying. And like, I would wake up in the middle of the night because I thought I was dying.
Now, you shared that story with me a lot. You really thought the end was close.
Yeah. Yeah. So, really interesting. So, anyway, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I was 33. Stephen was 5. He probably went through the same thing as my father, thinking, and me thinking, my God, my mother's gonna die, because I was just like, I was a mess, right? We had just moved to Pennsylvania, and he was doing things for me because I was just like so incapacitated by this panic. Then last week he told me he's been waking up and having kind of panic attacks and stuff. Guess how old he is?
Right, eh?
He's 33. So, really good book. I would say the whole idea behind, I mean, okay, family cycles and patterns is a well-known thing. I mean, that's nothing new, right? We all live through certain patterns and pick up certain beliefs and ideas and um, ego behaviors from uh, our family tree. But I think we've always sort of just looked at it from that immediate family and our immediate experience. Um, but yeah, I found it really interesting how indirect experiences can somehow be sort of start like a domino effect down the line and be affecting people until it is brought into the open and something is done about it to change that, to acknowledge it and to be aware of it. I mean, awareness, we always talk about that. Awareness is like the number one tool for changing your life. And
Yes.
so awareness of what it is that's going on and why you're in this place that you're in and how you've taken this on is like, wow. I felt when I saw all those pieces to put together, I felt such a burden being taken off of me,
Hmm.
just knowing that that's that's where it's coming from. And then in the book he gives you exercises about how to heal it and how to shift it and change your perspective on it, and um, really interesting. So um, I guess we could put the name of the book down in the
Yep.
comments of the YouTube thing. So for anybody who's ever, yes, we have our own stuff. And this is not about blaming our parents or our grandparents or our great grandparents. This is
That's right.
about recognizing what we've taken on and changing that, and how it can change your relationships with your parents, with your kids, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing that we always talk about. Um, but I just was really impressed with it because he talks about it. I think that's why in the beginning I wasn't interested, because I thought, oh yeah, so there's some other hokey thing to do. But he talks about it on the level of our our spiritual growth and enlightenment, and it's not just fluff and, oh look, here's some new kitschy thing that you can do, but it's really got some really good information and scientific research that's backed it up. Excuse me. Um, so I found a picture. I said to my mother, I was pretty sure that my mom and dad had a picture of my grandmother. One picture. So I said to my mother yesterday, do you have a picture of dad's mother? And she said, yeah. And I actually went in the storage room and dug it out of a box. It was in a box in the storage room. I dug it out of a box and I took it upstairs and I put it in my room. I felt it was so interesting because while I was sitting there going through this stuff and thinking about it and reading a little bit more of the book and the process and stuff yesterday, I felt such a connection to her and such compassion for her and such a desire to not dismiss her
Hmm.
and to give her the recognition that she didn't get. So, um, so yeah, I took her picture out and I put it upstairs, but I think I'm going to scan it and I think I'm going to write something um, about it and either put it on my blog or at the very least share it with my cousins, because I think it's really something that I just want to do something to honor her, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah, that feels
It's a
beautiful. It's a beautiful
Yeah,
idea, and that to do what you can, posthumously to close that cycle.
yeah.
to
And see,
acknowledge it, to
I,
acknowledge.
yeah, and I feel emotional even talking about it right now because I just think, I think it's the best thing to do for her and for me, you know.
Yeah, that's
And
right for you.
I don't know how many other of my cousins are having any experience or are being affected by it. I don't know. So, so that's my intention at some point. So yes, it's I think another really great tool for finding um, and identifying the things that are um, sort of keeping us from healing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's critically important because we do have these lives, and we know that we have, you know, in your case, it was always a residing fear. Um, and we don't want to think like, you know, what really helps to have a book like this and to be able to identify some of these things in our family cycles because it's good to not, when we feel like we're crazy, um, it can limit our power. It can make us feel um, inept or impotent that we can't. Why do I always have this thing afflicting me? Um, and while like I love what you said, you know, it's no excuse. You know, it's a reason. It's not an excuse, but it's a reason. And once we become aware, you know, once we're able to speak openly and see these things and see these patterns in our families, and whether it be this or any other area of life, where I love the title of the book, it doesn't start with you. And it's not to absolve responsibility, absolutely not. But once we become aware of it, then it is our responsibility. But having that reason why there's some things that we seem to carry and that we're afflicted with that other people don't seem to have or carry, um, you know, and it's this strange, we don't understand. We understand how connected we are. We don't understand how disconnected we are. And it's the ephemeral. We can't see it, and we only have hints at it. And it's really wonderful when we have a reason, or when we don't feel like it's just us, like we're defective, where there's something wrong with us. Because when we feel that way, it's hard to act because we're still stuck in the story. We're still stuck in the, geez, I don't know what it is about me, but I can't seem to get over this. And it can rule our lives. It can rule our behavior, and it can rule our interactions with others. And so having a book like this, and to be open to the idea that some things we are just burdened with from birth, but we can do something about it once we become aware of it.
Yeah, and I think what happened was for me, I was angry with myself for not being able to figure out what was happening with me and why I was feeling this way.
Hmm.
And when I did see that pattern, I it just shifted me into a place of compassion, not just for my grandmother, but or for my mother, but also for me. So it was this, it was all down the line. So that dismissal or that fear of being forgotten or dismissed or not recognized all down the line, um, now I have compassion for it, and I want to honor that. And you know, it's just helped me to see, like with my relationship with my mother, and you know, it just really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I was not able to see before.
Yeah.
And I think whatever tool is going to help you do that, whatever tool is going to help you get to the bottom of whatever it is that's keeping you from your joy and your peace of mind, then by all means, go for it. Um, and, you know, maybe it's sort of um, made me see that, you know, my judgment of other um, methods and processes as well. Um, because I think I was getting a little bit self-righteous about that too. But, you know, to be honest, I think that also comes from that feeling of being not recognized and dismissed, and wanting to be, so trying to make, you know, what I do be the be all and the end all. So it's like, it's just so many things that has affected that it's all sort of falling into place now, and it just feels so much better and so different, and it just sort of opened me up a little bit more.
Mhm. Well, I mean, there's no wonder why so much of this stuff is so heavy in so many of the world's religions. There's so many practices and rituals that honor the dead, or to, like in a way, you're honoring the dead of your grandmother, and there's a real connection to that. There's a real opening up of our spirit. We can feel our chest expand. We can feel that openness when we do things like this. And there's something there, beyond just it being a nice idea. It's physical. It's visceral. You feel it in your entire body. And I like what you said about, everywhere in life where we can make those massive unlocking is when we go from anger and we find the tool that will work for us in that situation that helps us go from anger to compassion. And when you can go from anger to compassion, oh my God, like the amount of like density that gets sloughed off, the amount of weight on your shoulders, the amount of weight on your spirit. It's incredible how constricted and how heavy you feel when you carry that with you, when you can't get from anger to compassion.
Yeah, and I mean the whole thing about being on this spiritual journey, or finding a better life for yourself, is really all about um, not searching for love, but finding the blocks that are keeping you from
Yeah,
seeing the love. That's all it is. And every
yeah,
time we can do that, we go deeper and deeper into that loving space inside us. And wow, it's uh, it's really interesting when that does happen, and when you do find a way to heal and to find those blocks, and what a shift it can make, no matter what it is that shows you the way. The point is to remember who you are. And that's the only reason for being, is to remember who we are.
yeah. Yeah, that hits the head so hard. We look at ourselves, we look at society, and the fallacy of trying to find love. And we make movies, and we make, we'll do so much in our lives to try to find love. Um, and it's inside of us all along. And I love what you say about it's more about removing the blocks so that you can feel it. It's almost like it's like a stream. Like love is like a stream that like just never ending that comes out of you. But if you have a whole bunch of crap in your little stream and garbage and rocks, and it's got to be diverted and everything, it's just not getting out.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's hard to see in ourselves, it's easy to see in others. People in our circles where like that person isn't loving a whole lot. And we can get this way in our main romantic relationship. We can get this in the way with our parents, with our kids, with family, with friends, with work, coworkers, whatever. And the love ceases to flow from us. And it is our natural um, state where we want to be loving and connecting. And it's the stories, and it's the unjustness, and it's all this stuff that we put in the way that prevents it from flowing unconstricted out into the world. And that really is more of where we need to keep our focus, because we keep trying to look outside of us to find love, which is really just love reflected, because we haven't yet put all the garbage in the way of that object we haven't yet to constrict our flow of love to. And that
Exactly.
pretty much explains new relationships in the honeymoon phase and everything. When it comes to new friends or new people we meet or whatever, there's that infatuation space, and that's because we haven't thrown a whole bunch of garbage in our stream yet.
Yeah. And if only we could hold on to that honeymoon phase, if only we could forget about going back to, well, in the past, this is what, my life was like, and this is going to happen again, or I'm starting to not feel good about myself, so it must be that person's fault, or whatever it is.
Yeah,
If we could
we
just like,
project. Yeah.
yeah, just don't even go there. Don't even go there.
Uh, uh,
But
yeah.
easier said than done.
Yeah, and that's why the awareness and communication is just so critically important. You need to communicate, because communication is pretty much the act in this metaphor of taking out the rocks, taking out the garbage, clearing it away, and and addressing things and seeing things as they are, not better or worse than they are, but as they are.
Yeah.
and be able to communicate openly with that with another person, where you can actually see and communicate about what is reality, or what is both your shared experience, then that can keep the love flowing, and we can stay in that space. We can stay in that space, and we can reclaim relationships we've lost, with the same process. But it needs open communication from both sides.
Yep, absolutely. So that's my story for this week.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I know that I know it's been a couple of rough weeks, and as you have this book sit with you, I'm looking forward to next week's show, and next week's pre-show that I'm the exclusive visitor to, that
Yeah.
I get to ask you about before we hit on air, and see how this whole process has taken you over the course of 4 or 5 weeks, especially.
Yeah. Although there's not a whole lot I don't share
No, it's true.
in
Yeah,
public either.
yeah.
Um, but which is odd for a 5, but I must be the 4 wing. Look at me, look at me.
And releasing, and
Yeah.
becoming wiser in life, being I need to share. By sharing and being vulnerable is where our love is, and thanks to Brene Brown for the both of us for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, I don't want to be one of those people who, claims to have it all together. I have some really bad days, people, really bad days. But I think the only difference is that um, I've been practicing for 14 years. And because of that practice, I know exactly what to do and where to look and how to find. But even still, there was still stuff I didn't know how to find. And so I wasn't beyond picking up a book clearly to find that. So Wayne Dyer used to say, be open to everything and assume you know nothing. And I think those are very wise words.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the wisest.
Yeah.
Wayne Dyer. How did you feel about finishing us off with the meditation today, Bettina?
Absolutely. And by the way, did you hear that Louise Hay passed away?
I did not.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Oddly enough, she passed away in her sleep 2 years to the day after Wayne Dyer. That's what made me think of it.
Hmm.
So very interesting. She was 90.
Well, a woman who did a lot of good in the world.
She certainly did. She really brought the spiritual journey to the mainstream, I think. Definitely. Made it more of a household word than it was before. So kudos to her. All
Yeah,
right.
and her work. If I can just jump on that, just
Yeah,
to
yeah.
give her a little bit of credit too, like her work might also help us as a society a lot. After she dies, about us taking up this fight back against the pharmaceuticals, because of her work in identifying what can lead to dis-ease in our body. I think that she's ahead of her time in that regard. And over the next few decades, when we realize that prescribing opiates to half the population might not be a good idea,
Mm-hmm.
I think her work could really help and be part of the groundwork that leads people back to a more natural way of taking care of their health.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's meditate. Let's close our eyes and take a deep breath, taking in the breath of life, allowing it to flow to every cell of our being as we settle in to that beautiful, safe, and perfect place where there is love and peace, wisdom and beauty. And in this place, as we breathe, letting go of pain, sorrow, fear, shame, and guilt. And taking ourselves back through the generations of our ancestry and seeing all those generations healed as we heal ourselves. And understanding that no matter what has happened in the past with our previous ancestors in previous generations, we don't have to carry that burden anymore. We don't have to take it on. We can let it go, not only for ourselves, but for them. And breathing into this space, feel yourself healed and feel your ancestors healed for as many generations as possible, going backwards, and as many generations as possible going forward. And then when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and your toes and bring yourself back to the world.
Thank you, Bettina.
You're welcome.
Yes, let's be light workers.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been a pleasure to put on the show for you, and it's we'll see you all next week.
Have a great week, everyone.